At the beginning of the story, there's a little pig happily exploring the forest all by itself. But then a python spots the pig and thinks it would make a tasty meal. Just when things look bad for the pig, two mischievous monkeys show up and start playing around, distracting the python long enough for the pig to escape. The python, not wanting to lose its dinner, starts chasing after both the pig and the monkeys. The clever monkeys quickly hide behind a panda, who will call Mr. Panda. The python demands Mr. Panda hand over the monkeys, but Mr. Panda refuses. The python gets angry and threatens him, but Mr. Panda stands his ground and grabs the python by the throat, tossing it far away. Before leaving, the python vows to get revenge for this embarrassment. Soon after, Mr. Panda's wife, Mrs. Panda, arrives and they leave together. Meanwhile, the monkeys are thrilled to see the scared-off python. Next, we meet a bear named Mike was taking a nap and dreaming happily. Suddenly, he woke up in the middle of his dream and noticed a poster outside his house. It announced that Oscar, a rabbit, would be flying in the sky with his rocket for the first time. Mike didn't like Oscar at all, and he got really mad when he saw the news. To calm down, he decided to go to the water and think things over. Meanwhile, a bunch of forest animals came to invite Mike to see Oscar. But Mike firmly said no, he didn't want to go there. The animals kept urging him, saying that Oscar was his friend and very successful, so he should definitely check it out. This made Mike even angrier, and he shouted that Oscar was not his friend. Realizing Mike was not going to change his mind, the animals left feeling disappointed. Oscar, the rabbit, then asked the animals why Mike wouldn't come. They explained that they had asked him many times, but he refused. So, Oscar decided not to dwell on it and took his rocket up into the sky. Unfortunately, after flying for a bit, the rocket exploded and all the animals below thought Oscar was gone for good. Back at home, Mike was minding his own business when suddenly, pieces of the rocket started falling around him. He quickly found a place to hide. Meanwhile, instead of crashing somewhere else, Oscar landed right on Mick's beehive. This made the bees very angry, and they started chasing after him and Mike. Realizing what was happening, Mike quickly brought Oscar inside his house. Then, they spotted some birds that were helping different baby animals find their mothers. One bird named Carl was laughing a lot because he had once delivered a baby zebra to a horse, and now he was supposed to deliver a baby panda. Everyone was worried that Carl might mess up again, so they decided to keep him away from the delivery duties. Just then, a piece of Oscar's rocket fell and hit Carl, causing him to lose his sense of direction. He ended up running into a tree and forgot who he was supposed to deliver the baby to. As he looked around, he saw Mick's house and thought the baby should go to the nice bear there. So, he left the baby panda in front of Mick's house. Meanwhile, Mike was really upset because Oscar's arrival had scared his bees away. The rabbit pointed out that if Mike had put the bees in the right spot, they wouldn't have flown off. This made the bear angry, and he snapped back, saying, "You're not my friend, and I don't want to argue. You're always causing trouble for us." Mike then asked him to leave his house. Oscar admitted, "You're right. I messed up. Don't worry, I'll make you a new beehive." But Mike insisted he should leave first. Oscar then asked if he stay for a few days since his own home was wrecked from the explosion. Just then, they heard a baby crying. They rushed over and found a panda cub left there. Oscar discovered a note in the panda's basket and asked Mike why he had ordered it. Mike is shocked and says, "How did this happen? I didn't order a baby panda." Just then, the baby panda began to cry. Mike told Oscar that they needed to stop the crying because he couldn't handle the noise. Oscar suggested that the baby might be hungry and needed some milk. They quickly came up with a plan and decided to feed the baby coconut water. After drinking it, the baby stopped crying. Then, they realized they couldn't just leave such a tiny baby anywhere. Mike insisted that they had to return the baby to its parents, or he wouldn't be able to live normally. Oscar agreed, but wanted to go with him to return the baby. Mike, however, told him he couldn't come along. He went into the room to look at a map and figure out where the pandas lived in the forest. After studying the map, Mike thought the journey would be long, so he wanted to take the baby by the river. Mike grabbed her board and left the house. Oscar, not wanting to be left behind, begged Mike to let him come, but he refused. Being determined, Oscar managed to cling to the back of Mick's boat as they set off. Knowing he might have trouble breathing underwater, he cleverly used a piece of bamboo to breathe. Mike, being smart, noticed the piece of bamboo on his boat and kept trying to move it but couldn't lift it. Then, he starts blowing into the bamboo, which causes Oscars to inflate and float on the water. When Mike sees this, he gets really mad and tells Oscar to leave his boat right away. Poor Oscar has no choice but to go. But then the baby panda starts crying, and Mike can't handle the sound of a crying child. So, Oscar tries to calm the baby down, and seeing this, Mike finally agrees to let Oscar come along. He tells Oscar that he has to take care of the boat and make sure the baby doesn't cry. After saying this, Mike goes to sleep, and then a bird named Duke flies over to Oscar. When Duke starts talking, Mike comes out and tells him to leave, but Duke asks why he's being treated this way since he just wanted some tea. Mike replies that there's no tea today and tells him to go. The baby panda starts crying again, and Oscar tries hard to stop it, but nothing works. Then Duke tells a story, and just like that, the baby stops crying. Poor Mike can't take it anymore, so he asks Duke to join them because he can't stand the crying. Later that night, they reach a river and decide to camp on the shore. Suddenly, a wolf named Janice becomes paralyzed with fear. Then he hears a voice and asks who he is, and the voice tells him it's the fear inside him that's causing this. Janice doesn't believe it and manages to run away. Meanwhile, Mike and the others fall asleep. In the middle of the night, Mike has a vivid dream that jolts him awake, and he screams at Oscar, warning him that something terrible is about to happen. Mike then shares with Oscar that he saw him in his dream, hoping he might take it seriously. After that unsettling dream, Mike becomes anxious and boards the ship, urging everyone to look after the baby panda carefully. Just then, Janice arrives, but freezes in fear at the sight of Mike, becoming paralyzed again. Mike quickly asks him what's wrong, and Janice explains that he gets scared easily, which often leads to him freezing up like this. Meanwhile, the baby panda starts crying again, and despite their efforts, they can't calm it down. Suddenly, Janice lets out a loud roar, which miraculously stops the panda from crying. Grateful for the silence, Mike invites the wolf to join them. In another scene, a tiger suggests to a bee that if they became friends, they could all play together. But the bee, frightened, buzzes away. Meanwhile, they are struggling to navigate their boat through thick fog, causing them to bump into each other repeatedly. To protect the baby from danger, Mike instructs Duke to fly away with it. Duke quickly takes off and tells them to steer their boat toward it. Oscar takes charge of steering, but the fog makes visibility impossible, leading to a crash against a rock before they finally reach the shore. Mike, furious, blames Oscar for the accident and angrily tells all the animals to return home. This upsets the baby panda, who starts crying again, prompting Mike to step in to soothe it. At that moment, the tiger named 𝐆-𝐚𝐢𝐥 appeared, saying he had come over after hearing the baby's cries. As soon as the baby panda saw 𝐆-𝐚𝐢𝐥, it stopped crying. 𝐆-𝐚𝐢𝐥 then expressed his desire to help return the baby to its parents and asked if he would join them. Together, they set off along a desert path, determined to reunite the baby panda with its family. However, they soon encountered a massive wall. Duke pointed out that they might have reached China, as this was the famous Great Wall. He then picked up the baby panda and flew over the wall. One by one, Mike tossed everyone else over the wall too, but in the end, he found himself stuck on the other side. With no other options, he grabbed a piece of wood and told Duke to throw a big stone at it. In this way, Mike cleverly climbed over the wall. Once on the other side, Mike gently lowered the panda down, and the baby started moving forward, feeling joyful. Suddenly, they noticed a herd of wild elephants charging toward them, and they quickly dodged the stampede. Mike suggested they take a break, so they found a peaceful spot to rest. Oscar began singing a song to help the baby panda sleep, which made the little one start calling him father. This made Oscar feel uneasy, and he reassured the panda that it would soon be back with its real parents. Just then, we see the wild snake from earlier in the story. The python, having overheard Oscar, remembered how Mr. Panda had mistreated him and decided to take revenge by kidnapping the baby panda. At that moment, Mike woke up from a nightmare and realized the baby panda was missing. Everyone began searching for the little panda, but it was nowhere to be found. Mike was furious with Oscar since he was supposed to be in charge of the baby. Duke then scolded Mike, pointing out that he should have known Oscar wouldn't be able to handle the responsibility. Mike shot back, insisting that no one had the right to yell at him. He argued that the baby was a shared responsibility and that everyone could have helped if they had wanted to. He accused them of just lying around like lazy horses and not doing anything right. This led to a big argument, and soon they all went their separate ways. Janice found himself alone in the jungle, and fear crept back in, leaving him paralyzed with anxiety. Meanwhile, Mike wandered through the jungle, grumbling to himself. He had wanted to reunite the baby with its family, but felt like he had failed. However, he soon reminded himself that failing once didn't mean he couldn't try again. He decided he would find the baby and return it to its family. Feeling more determined, he set off to search for the child again. Oscar, feeling guilty about the baby's disappearance, also began looking for it. Realizing their mistakes, the animals came together again and started searching as a team. Then, the three monkeys from the beginning of the story appeared, announcing that a python had taken the baby. They led everyone to the python's cave. Inside, the python was telling the baby that crying wouldn't help because soon it would be his meal. Just then, the python emerged from the cave after hearing a commotion. Oscar and Duke had teamed up to distract the python. The python got angry and attacked them, eventually wrapping Mike up completely. To save him, Oscar bravely fought the python. Just then, 𝐆-𝐚𝐢𝐥, the tiger, showed up and tried to chase the python away, but the snake turned its attention to 𝐆-𝐚𝐢𝐥 instead. Janice rushed in to save 𝐆-𝐚𝐢𝐥, but fear kept holding him back. Despite his fear, he leaped forward and grabbed the python. Together, they managed to tie it up. The python, frightened, managed to escape, but not before they rescued the baby panda from its cave. The little panda was overjoyed and climbed into Mick's lap. Everyone praised Janice for saving them from the python. Meanwhile, Mr. and Mrs. Panda were anxiously waiting for their baby to return home. They soon heard the sound of their baby panda laughing and saw it walking back with some animals. Overjoyed, they rushed to hug their little one. Oscar then expressed his desire to hold the baby panda again, and it happily climbed into his lap. Mike suggested that the pandas should visit them when the baby grew up, and Mrs. Panda invited them to come back. After saying their goodbyes to Mr. and Mrs. Panda, they started to leave, but the baby panda began to follow them. Even though they wanted to take it with them, they knew they couldn't. Even though it was tough, they headed to their own homes. When they got back, Mike told Oscar that he was his friend and promised to build him a new house. That night, they both fell asleep together, but suddenly they heard a child crying outside again. They rushed out and found a kid who was indeed crying. Mike started yelling when he saw the child because they needed to make sure to take the kid to the right place. And just like that, our funny adventure story comes to an end.